Hi class! So, as part of our first journey down into JavaScript, we're going to learn about the document object model. And the document object model is basically another word for the structure of your HTML page. And by using the document object model, we can allow JavaScript to act upon HTML elements on your page. So this is really, really cool because we can integrate two languages in one page. In one piece of code, we have the two languages, which is amazing. And besides HTML and JavaScript, we also have CSS in there already. And SVG we can say is like also a markup language. Yeah, so it's like really, really amazing that we could just have all 3 or 4 of these languages or markups interacting with each other in the same place. And so in terms of making JavaScript interact with other things on your HTML page, we have to use this DOM. All right, so how does it work? Let's look for an example. So there is something in HTML, there's a way of looking at our page, which is called the node tree. And the node tree is, it's just another way, it's basically like a sitemap almost of your page. So we looked at this kind of structure when we were looking at wireframing, and that's kind of basically what it is. But if you could imagine, rather than drawing a wireframe and then making the page, you look at a page and then write out all the elements that make it up. So that's the node tree. So we'll have a look at that. And by going through that node tree, we can access different document object model nodes and do things to them. Yeah, so let's have a look. Let's switch over to the screen and have a look. Let's look at our standard HTML page. And we can take that very same page from assignment 1 that we've been looking at and using as our beginning point this whole time. So I will save it in my class folder, and I'm going to call this JavaScript Explorations. That was the folder I meant to make and not the name of the file. So in class site, we will make JavaScript Explorations. Okay, so that came up because you cannot have two documents with the same name, and because the document that I made has no extension, so it's not a dot anything, it's just called this JavaScript Explorations, and it's not a defined document type to the operating system. When I'm naming the folder the same thing, the computer sees them as the same thing, even though one is a folder and one is a file. So as we mentioned before, as we learned, files and folders are abstract concepts. They're all kind of like non-entities until we give them a name and assign them. That name kind of gives the computer a way of looking at the file and parsing the file. Then it knows what program to open it with or what to do with it. So for all intents and purposes of discrimination, at least, these two things are the same, even though one is a folder and one is a file. So, okay, we will say JavaScript project. and then put that inside. And now I can finally call it index.html at last. Okay, now let's see if this propagated here. It did. It's really cool how I have not closed this file, and yet, despite the fact that I moved the file from one place to another, Atom has like stuck to that. Like Atom is still aware that it's the same file, even though I did all these things to it in the Finder. So that really speaks to the awesomeness of Atom. Good job, Atom. Okay, so we have our doc type, title, meta. This should look very familiar. Paragraph. Okay, so let's draw the DLM for this, and we can do it in, okay. All right, cool. Model. So here we have the HTML itself. And then within that, we have the head and the body, right? Head and body. So this is where having good nesting in your markup will really help you see the things you need to see and label the things you need to label. So within the body, on this level, we have H1, P, and UL. So we can make these H1, paragraph, and UL. And then inside of the UL, we have our lists. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, great. And then in the head, we have two vowels, two lines, the meta information and the title of our file. And then I'll just move these forward a little bit so that I can see a little bit better what's going on. There we go. And then I'm just going to align them. And our book has boxes around the elements so that you can better, because this looks like a funny word poem kind of thing right now, and then having these boxes just helps us differentiate the various elements. Okay, let's see if this will work. Oops. No. Like so. Maybe. Let's see. Yes. Excellent. All right, there we go. We could further make this a little better by putting lines, so really making it look like a tree, right? It's like the node tree. So if we have our HTML, it leads to the CSS, or sorry, to the head and body. This is a little trickier because it's so close. Maybe I'll just like, yeah. This is so close, it's like not even making the right, like you can barely see it. There we go. Something like that. So that is your node tree, visualized node tree of this page over here. Okay, great. So now that we did that, what are we actually going to do with it? How are we going to talk to it? The document object model can be accessed in different ways. One of the ways is to access it by the element's name. And so this is going to be called get elements by tag name, and it will be a function. All right, so how do we insert JavaScript into our HTML? That is undoubtedly your first question. So just like we did with the style tag, we are going to make a script tag. And this means, of course, that you can also link. So you could do the link rel thing for another file, but we're just going to have a script tag in our head, and it's going to be type equals, there we go, text.javascript. And this was kind of cool. You can see other kinds of scripts that can be added. All right, but we are going to have a text/JavaScript type. Just saw a really great video that suggests that you actually put the script tag at the end of your page, right before the closing body tag. So right here. And I like this a lot because when we're dealing with render order and the rendering order of your stack, we want to have access to certain elements, and sometimes if you don't render something out, you can't have access to it in the JavaScript. So this kind of like always ensures that you do have access to what's going on. So so that's a great, I think, protocol for moving forward. All right, so we have our script, the type, and so let's make something happen. So this is there's this function which is called the alert function. It's a really quick way to test whether or not our stuff is working. It's almost like a means of debugging something. So here it's called alert, and we open and close parentheses, and inside of it we can put some information. So we can do our hello world is the thing people always say when they make something new in code. So we'll say hello world, and then if we take this, hello world, okay. So simple. All right, and then how would we incorporate the DOM? So let's see. The first thing we can do is we can make a variable. So a variable is it's just a container to hold some information. So we can say variable hello. So our variable, which is named hello, and we're going to set it. So we're going to give it the value of, and we can just say 4 plus 6. And then instead of having this string, which gets replicated exactly in parentheses, we are going to have our variable.
So kind of like in math, right? It could even make more sense if we make it a variable x is 4 plus 6 over x. So here we go, and it says 10. All right, great. So now that we've passed a number into it, let's see if we can pass some information from the document using the document object model. Okay, so we want to get the inner HTML or the inner text inside of our paragraph element, let's say. So the first thing we are going to have to do is we'll give it an ID, and we can say paragraph ID equals texty. And now, instead of having this variable be 4 plus 6, we're just going to give it this information. So how are we going to do that? We will use the document object model, and we're going to append the information that like kind of it almost like de-encapsulates the information for us. So our first top level kind of thing that we're doing, we can make some space here, is we're looking at the document. So we'll start by typing document, and then we will type get element by ID, right? So we're getting the element based on the user set ID that I've set right here. And now you have to tell it what the ID is, right? So in my case, it's texty. And then we're gonna say inner text, I think. Yeah, inner text. Okay, so now X is set to the documents element that has an ID of texties, inner text. So that's this information. Okay, so when we open it in Firefox, we should get, here we go. So that's it. That's one example of using the DOM, most basic example. And if we go to our beloved W3 Schools, you can see here under JavaScript all of the information about the DOM model. So I will let you go to this page and explore all of these for the rest of Tuesday. All right.